So in our last class, we are discussing about topic number 5. Topic number 5, which is named as business or financial assets. Valuation models. Business or financial assets valuation model. And we were discussing about valuation of ordinary shares. We were discussing on valuation of ordinary shares. Valuation of ordinary shares. And under valuation of ordinary shares, we had looked at different types of valuation of ordinary shares. We had talked about the net asset method. We had talked about the net asset method. We talked of the super profit method. We also looked at the cash flow model. We looked at the cash flow model. And under cash flow model, we talked of price earning ratio. And also we looked at price earning ratio, and also we have this other one, which is the earnings valuation method. Today we are supposed to start with, we were supposed to look at the next type of valuation, which was the fourth one, if I'm not wrong. Yes, the fourth one, which is the dividend valuation model. Dividend valuation model, which is also known as the Godon's model. The Godon's model. Dividend valuation model, or the Godon's model. Right? So under Godon's model, we say that he understands or he recognizes three types of firms. Basing on a valuation, basing on a dividend payments, and therefore, when we are trying to measure the value of ordinary shares, we need to understand those three types of firms. So under this method also, it utilizes the fundamental theory. It utilizes the fundamental theory. Of valuation. The fundamental theory of valuation states that the intrinsic value of a security, is equal to the present value, of all expected benefits from that security. I'll repeat that. I've said that the dividend valuation model utilizes the fundamental theory of valuation. Which states that the intrinsic value of a security, is equal to the present value of all expected future benefits from that security. Right? And the expected benefits in this regard are the dividends. Expected benefits of ordinary shares are dividends. So the intrinsic value of ordinary shares in this matter will be the present value of all expected dividends from a given security or a given ordinary share. So So, what are the types of firms? The types of firms under Gordon's model. What are the type of firms under Gordon's model? The first one, we have a non-growth firm, a non-growth firm. We also have a constant growth firm, and then lastly, we have a supernormal growth firm. I believe we are together. At any given point when you see you are not understanding or you're not getting the point, always raise. Don't wait. Don't wait for too long. So we continue. We start with the first one, which is the non-growth firm. We start with the first one, which is the non-growth firm. So a non-growth firm, it is a firm where dividends do not grow. The dividends do not grow, right? So it is a firm whose dividends do not grow. This means they remain constant. They remain constant to infinity. They remain constant to infinity, right? So in this case, the intrinsic value is equal to the present value of constant dividends. The intrinsic value is equal to the present value of constant dividends to infinity. Constant dividends to infinity is equal to the present value of constant dividends to infinity. Therefore, it will be illustrated as follows. The intrinsic value is equal to the present value of constant dividends. So we take our DO over KE, DO over KE. Remember when we were introducing the concept here, we said that the required rate of return is KE. The required rate of return in this regard is KE. KE stands for the cost of equity. So at any given point when you are doing valuation, the component cost will always be the required rate of return. So here we say where PO is the intrinsic value, KE is the cost of equity, DO is the just paid dividends. Just paid dividends. What we need to note here is that DO will always be equal to D1. DO will always be equal to D1. And here we say that D1 is the expected dividend. Expected dividend. So, what is the difference between DO and D1? What is the difference between DO and D1? DO is the just paid dividend, or in other terms, we can call it as the current year dividend. Current year dividend. We can also call it as dividend to be paid in a week's time. Dividends to be paid in a week's time. Current year dividends to be paid in a week's time, or the just paid dividends. This will always be represented by DO. Then our D1 here is the expected dividends. Expected dividends, the dividends that we are expecting to pay in the next financial year, right? Another person will call it as the future dividends. Future dividends. Future dividends, right? So all those will always describe our D1. I believe we are together up to that point. So let's have an illustration. Let's have an illustration. Let's have an illustration. We don't have an illustration for a non-growth firm in our past papers, so I'll dictate it. I'll dictate it. So write and say, Mwenda Pole Limited has been paying constant dividends. Mwenda Pole Limited has been paying constant dividends of 2 shillings per share. Mwenda Pole Limited has been paying constant dividends of 2 shillings per share for the last 5 years. Has been paying constant dividends of 2 shillings per share for the last 5 years. This pattern is expected to continue. This pattern is expected to continue indefinitely. This pattern is expected to continue indefinitely. Required determine the intrinsic value. Determine the intrinsic value. If the required rate of return is 12% per annum, determine the intrinsic value. If the required rate of return is 12% per annum. That is the question. That is the question. So how do we go about that question? How do we go about that question? First things first, you must understand which type of a firm is the business operating in. 12% per annum. 12% per annum. So you must understand the type of firm that the business is operating in. In this question, they have specified that they are paying constant dividends of 2 shillings, right? Once they've specified that way, then you need to understand that it is a non-growth firm. Non-growth firm. And on that case, you can now be able to give the examiner what? The formula. You can be able to give the examiner the formula by saying PO is equivalent to D1 over KE. D1 over KE, right? So here, what is our D1? What is our D1? Let's use DO because we've been told it has been paying a constant dividend. So it's DO over KE. But if you use D1, it's all the same because we say that DO is equivalent to D1. So our DO here, we've been told that they are paying a constant dividend of 2 shillings. Constant dividend of 2 shillings. So our DO is 2 shillings. And our KE we've been told is 12%. Right? So you take 2 divided by KE of 12%. 0.12. What are we getting as our solution there? Someone to use the calculator, please. I'm getting 16.67. 16.667. So these are shillings per share. So we are having 16.667 as our required rate of return. Someone is asking, what is the difference between the required rate of return and the cost of equity? Basically, it is one and the same thing. It is one and the same thing. It's just that we use the required rate of return when we refer to time value of money, and we use the cost of equity when we refer to valuation concept. So, they just mean one and the same thing. It is the cost of capital, cost of equity, the cost that we incur when we issue out what? Equity component, right? Required rate of return, it is the rate that we incur when we do what? We save with a certain financial institution. So they just mean the same thing. So that is how we calculate the intrinsic value when it comes to a non-growth firm. When it comes to a non-growth firm, I understand or I believe that we are all at the same point. We are all at the same point. So I want us to look at the second concept. I want us to look at the next concept, which is the constant growth firm. Constant growth firm. Constant growth firm. Constant growth firm. Another person will call it a normal growth. Normal growth firm. They are one and the same thing also. So a constant growth firm, this is a type of a farmer, this is a type of a farm whose dividend grow at a constant growth rate. They grow at a constant growth rate to perpetuity. I'll repeat, a constant growth firm is a type of a farm whose dividends grow at a constant growth rate to perpetuity. They grow at a constant growth rate to perpetuity. The intrinsic value will therefore be equal to the present value of growing dividends. The intrinsic value will therefore be equal to the present value of growing dividends. Present value of growing dividends to perpetuity, which can be illustrated as follows. PO is equivalent to DO into bracket 1 plus G divided by KE minus G. KE minus G. Another person, in case you've been given expected dividends, we can say that we take our D1 over KE minus G. D1 over KE minus G. So, depending with the information provided, you can either use this formula or this formula. So, that's why I started by saying you need to understand the difference between DO and D1. The difference between DO and D1. DO, we said, is the just paid dividends, while D1 is the expected dividends, and therefore G is the growth rate. You can call it dividend growth rates. dividends growth rate, the dividends growth rate, and PO is the intrinsic value. The intrinsic value, the intrinsic value. Are we together up to that point? So I want us to look at an illustration. We shall look at various illustrations. The first illustration will be in 2021. I believe we all can access the past papers. I believe we all can access the past papers. May 2021. May 2021. So May 2021, question number 1C. May 2021. Question number 1C. And it says, part 2, Hazi Limited expects to pay dividends of 5.4 shillings per share in 1 year's time. Hazi Limited expects to pay dividends of 5.4 shillings per share in 1 year's time. Additional information. The company's dividend payout ratio is 60%. The shareholders' required rate of return on equity is 15%. The dividends have been growing at a constant rate in perpetuity. The company shares are currently trading at 64.50 per share at the Securities Exchange. Required. Advise the investor who holds shares in Hazi Limited whether to buy more shares or to sell the shares. That is what they want us to determine, to advise. Someone can close the eye and say, he needs to buy the shares. He needs to buy the shares. And another one will say, he needs to sell the shares. But if you do that without calculating the intrinsic value, there's a possibility that you get wrong, right? There's a possibility that you get wrong because you don't know the value of the shares, right? Yes. So here we say, they are expecting to pay dividends of 5.40 per share. So here we have a question. The answer 5.40, is it DO or is it D1? Someone to kindly tell me 5.40, the value of dividend, is it DO or D1? I want to see if you were in class. Kama tulikuwa tunapika kama Zoom iko on. Someone to tell me. I'm waiting for the responses on the chat area. Victor is saying D1. Any other child? D1. Faith Atieno. Nasri D1. Alex D1. I can see majority of us are saying D1. That's a good response. Shrine is saying D1. Good. I can see all of us are saying D1. Sijaona mtu akisema D0. So it is expected dividend, so it is D1. It is D1. So we are having a D1 of how much? We are having a D1 of 5.4. First thing we look at 5.4. Then we are told the company dividend payout ratio is 60%. So we have the payout ratio of 60%. Then return on equity. The return on equity. We are having a return on equity of 15%. Return on equity of 15%. Then the dividend has been growing constantly, rate in perpetuity. The current company's shares are currently selling at 64. So our MPS, the current market price per share is 64.50, right? 64.50. So we want to determine the value of ordinary share based on this information, right? And we say that since we have a point there, which is point number 3, it says dividends have been growing at a constant rate in perpetuity. Point number 3, dividends have been growing at a constant rate in perpetuity. This tells us that the type of a firm in which you're operating in is a constant growth firm, and therefore our PO will be equivalent to, mark the type of dividend you are having, will be equivalent to B1 over KE minus G. B1 over KE minus G. When you look at your information here, we don't have our G. Therefore, we need to calculate it. So I say that based on information, we have to get our intrinsic value. The areas of concern when determining the G, payout ratio, and the return on investment. That is the first thing that we need to look at in a question when we're given G. We have payout, we have return on equity. So we can get our G by saying G will be equivalent to B times RE. B times RE, where B is equal to return on equity, while RE is the retention ratio. So with that regard, we have our B as 15%. Our RE, we haven't been given. To get your RE, we can say that you take 1 minus payout ratio. 1 minus payout ratio. So we can say that it's 1 minus payout ratio that we have in 60%. So it's 1 minus 0.6, which you are having 0.4, right? So here we can say that our G will be equivalent to return on equity of 15%, 0.15 multiplied by retention ratio of 0.4. What are we getting on our calculators? Tunapata ngapi kwa calculator zetu? 0.06, thank you. So we are having a G of 0.06, which is equivalent to 6%, sorry, which is equivalent to 6%, right? That's our G. So, since we have all the variables, we can now determine our intrinsic value. We can now determine our intrinsic value, where we say that intrinsic value is equals to D1. Our D1 we have 5.4 divided by KE. Our KE here is the return on equity, which is 0.15. Then we less what? We less our G of 0.06. 0.06. Someone to help me calculating. Someone to help me calculating. Someone to help me calculating, please. So I'm told that we are having 60. We are having 50 shillings per share. 60 shillings per share. 60 shillings per share. So that is our intrinsic value. The examiner did not require us to determine the intrinsic value, but he told us to advise. He told us to advise. How do you advise? You compare the market price per share. We are having our MPS of 64.50. And then we are having our intrinsic value of 60 shillings. How can you advise? In other terms, tunaambiwa hivi, this share should be selling at 60 bob. But now we are selling it at 64.50. The question is it overvalued or undervalued? Is it overvalued or undervalued? Someone is saying undervalued, another one is saying overvalued. Mwingine anasema undervalued, mwingine overvalued. Wale wanasema undervalued or overvalued. This is what we need to understand. Let me understand that we all know Swahili. Tunaambiwa hivi. Hii share inafaa iuzwe at 60 bob. Inafaa kuuzwa na 60 bob. Inafaa ikuwe 60 bob. Lakini kwa sababu serikali ni mbaya, inatuuzia na 64 bob. Sio serikali per se, the market, right? So it should be selling at 60 bob. It should be selling at 60 bob, but it is selling at 64. So we are asking ourselves, is it overvalued or undervalued? That is the question. Higher, overvalued. That is one person amesema. Overvalued. English was the problem. Good. Overvalued. Good. I want to see someone with a different opinion. Okay. So the security is overvalued. The security is overvalued. So, if it's overvalued, what should the investor do? What should the investor do? If it's overvalued, what should the investor do? We are asked here to determine, advise an investor who holds shares. So, huyu jamaa akona shares kwa hiyo kampuni. So, tunapata tumadvise. We are told to advise the investor who holds shares in Hazi Limited whether to buy more shares or to sell the shares. What should we do? Should we buy or should we sell? Buy, sell. That's another question. Victor is saying sell. Another person. This is what people are saying, that it's only Victor who's in class. Wengine wetu wote tumeenda kupika, si ndio? Leah is saying sell. So it is overvalued, so we should sell, right? So we should advise him to sell the shares. He should sell the shares because they are overvalued. They are overvalued. So, and that is how we tackle a question like this when it comes. Any question up to that point? Ask your question. Ask it, just ask it. Sijakupata vizuri. On the payout ratio, what about it? Here. Or I allow you to speak. Okay, unmute yourself, then speak. Unmute yourself.
Okay, according to the statement,
Yes.
retained earnings equal to 1 minus payout ratio. Is 1 constant?
Yes, 1 is a constant. This is what it means. This is what it means. 1 represents 100%, right? So out of 100% earnings, we are told that 60% is payout. 60% is payout, right? So if 60% is payout, what is the retention ratio? It is the remainder, right? So the remainder is 40%, which is the same as 0.4. Sawa. Are you okay now?
Yes, I'm okay.
Good. So we continue. Another illustration. Another illustration, we have it in November. November 2018. So November 2018, I believe you are there. Question number 2. November 2018, question number 2C. November 2018, question 2C, we are told the earnings per share and dividends per share data for Maraba Limited over the last 5 years are provided below. We are having between year 2013 to 2017, we are having the respective dividends per share and the respective earnings per share. Then we're told a prospective investor is considering buying the shares at which the company, shares of this company, which are currently selling at 55 each at the securities market. The investor's required rate of return is 20%. Required, advise the investor whether to buy the shares of Maraba Limited using Godon's model. We advise him using Godon's model. So in this question, we said that you need to identify if it's the type of a firm in which you're operating in. The table up there, it shows us that we need to determine the growth rates. Since when you look at the question, we don't have any growth rate, right? So if you see that table there, just know that it will help us to determine the growth rate. So it means that this is a constant growth firm, a constant growth firm. And once you have identified the type of a farmer, you give the examiner the formula by saying DO 1 plus G over KE minus G over KE minus G. Right? So, what is our DO? Our DO, we have been given various dividends per share, right? And the last year under consideration, which is 2017, they told us that the DPS is 1.80. That is the dividends per share. And that means that that is our DO, 1.80. 1.80. Then we've been told that the required rate of return, which is our KE, is at 20%, right? Then we are told that the market price per share, our MPS, is 55 shillings, right? On this information here, what we are missing is the value of G. It is the value of G, right? Then how will we get our G here? We shall say that G is equivalent to N minus 1 square root of current dividend divided by past dividend. Then you do what? The answer that you get, you less 1. The answer that you get, you less 1. So, n is how many periods? And the number of periods under consideration, we are having 5 minus 1. Square root of current dividend is 1.8. Past dividend, current dividend is the dividend for the period. Past dividend, it's 1, right? Then the answer that you get is less 1. Nataka muniambie answer hapo. Kindly make sure that you have your calculator and try to attempt to solve this. I know I, and I'll tell you in a few minutes. Kindly, let's calculate. Watu wamegoma kucalculate. These are all good trials. On my calculator, I'm having 0.158. 0.158. That is my calculator. Good. So majority of you. So why don't you invite a different answer? Those who have a different answer. Those who have a different answer. It is the way we are organizing the calculator, right? Board mass. The concept of board mass takes precedence here, right? So we shall multiply. We shall work with the bracket first. And within the bracket, we have some items to identify. So here, first of all, we simplify to be 4 square root. So this is the 4th root, right? This is the fourth root, ikiwa hivyo. 1.8 divided by 1, right? So this is what we do first. On your calculator, those who have 82 ms, scientific calculator 82 ms, you shall do 4, then shift. 4, then shift. 4, then shift. Then you press this sign on your calculator. Once you press this sign, you open the bracket, then you say 1.8 divided by 1. Close the bracket. Then answer. You press on equal sign. You press on equal sign. After you press the equal sign, press -1. You press -1 after the equal sign, right? -1. It will give you the answer there. I believe you are following. So we have 1.583. Thank you. 1.583. We continue. So that is our growth rate. That is our growth rate, 0.1583. So we can now determine our intrinsic value by saying DO of 1.8 into bracket 1 plus 0.1583 divided by KE of 20%, 0.20 minus 0.1583. Tunapata ngapi hapo? What are we getting there? Zero point 2 is the same as 0.20. Any value after a 0 after a decimal is useless. $49.99. Per share, right? That is the intrinsic value. But it is selling at 55 shillings. MPS is 55 shillings. So what advice should we tell this person? What is the advice to this person? Okay, go to the question and see if they've asked us if we can sell. If they've asked us to sell, they haven't asked us to sell, right? They've asked us if the investor can buy the security, right? You've been asked if the investor can buy the security. So don't set your question, right? So we've been asked, advise the investor on whether to buy the shares of Maraba Limited. Advice on whether to buy. So you say the investor should not buy. The investor should not buy. Since they are overvalued, 10 million, and the 99 others who were silent and they knew the answer. Sawa. And that is how we tackle that question. Let us look the last question here. Let us look the last question. In 2019, November 2019, so look at November 2019, question number 3C. November 2019, question 3C. November 2019, question number 3C. So it says, question 3C, it says, Fairland Industries Limited has recently been listed on the Securities Exchange. The company has a policy of paying out gradually increasing dividends per share over the past 5 years, as indicated below. We have the number of years, the respective EPS, and the respective DPS. Additional information, the company has recently paid the dividends for the year ended 31st December 2018. The shares are therefore quoted ex-div. The management is considering a change in the financing policy, whereby greater financing will be provided from internally generated funds. This is expected to reduce the dividends per share to 5 shillings in the year ending 31st December 2019. The growth rate in earnings per share and dividends per share is expected to increase to 14%. per annum for the year ending 31st December 2019. The company's shareholders require a minimum rate of return of 16%. Required. Using the dividend growth model, determine the market price per share as at 31st December 2018, prior to the change in the financing policy. Number 2, the market price per share as at 31st December 2018 under the new financing policy. Then number 3, the break-even growth rate in dividends per share using the market price calculated in C1 above. That is the question. So, number 1, they want the MPS before the new policy, right? And we said that when you see that table, we need to understand that it is a constant growth firm. Therefore, we say our intrinsic value will be equivalent to VO into bracket 1 plus G over KE minus G. Mwalimu ameandika formula kila wakati anapoanza swali. Then you just get a student who goes to the exam room without writing a formula. Understand that the formula is always 1 mark. Sawa sawa. Formula is 1 mark. Hata ukianguka, that's 1 mark uko nayo, right? So always embrace that. So our DO here, our DO, we are told in 2018 is 7.3. Our KE, we are told it's 16%. Then we have our G, which we don't have. So we need to determine our G by saying our growth rate will be determined by taking n-1 into bracket current dividend divided by past dividends. Then the answer that we get is next one. I believe we are following. So our end in this regard, our end here, we are having how many periods? 5 periods. So it's a 5 minus 1. Square root of current dividend is 7.3 divided by past dividend of 5.0. Then we next one. Higher, what our calculator? Those ones with the calculator. We don't have someone in the calculator. $0.0992. Thank you. So here we are having 0.0992 as our G. So we determine the first intrinsic value by saying DO, we have a DO of 7.3 into bracket 1 plus G, 1 plus 0.0992 over KE of 16, 0.16 minus 0.0992. Tunapata ngapi? Anyone with a calculator to solve that? $131.98. Thank you. 131.98. So this is shillings 131.98 per share. Right? That is how we calculate the first part of it. Part 2. Part 2 at all, the market price per share as of 31st December 2018 under the new financing policy. So here we are asked MPS and a new policy, right? So under the new policy, our DO we are told in note number 2, tunaambiwa namna gani? The management is considering a change in the financing policy where greater financing will be provided from internally generated funds. This is expected to reduce dividends per share to 5 shillings. So our D1 will be 5 shillings, right? Remember, we've called it D1. Why? We've called it D1 because we are told that it will be reduced to 5 shillings in the year ending December 2019. We're in 2018, as per the question. We're in 2018, but this is the price per share in 2019. So it's D1, right? Then in note number 3, the growth rate in earnings per share and dividends per share is expected to increase to 14%. So this shows that our G is 14%. Our G is 14%, and our KE will remain at 16%, right? Our KE will remain at 16%. So we say our PO is equal to D1 over KE minus G. D1 over KE minus G, which will be equivalent to 5 divided by KE of 0.16 minus 0.14 minus 0.14, right? Tunapata ngapi hapo? What are we getting there? 250. Thank you. So here we are having 250 per share. That is the second part of the question. I believe we are all together to that point. So the last part, we are asked to determine the break-even growth rate in dividends, break-even growth rate. We determine the break-even growth rate in dividends per share using the price calculated in C1 above, using the market price calculated in C1 above. So we want the growth rate using this market price, the market price that you have. Remember, we have a new policy. And here, we have a new policy where D1 is 5 shillings, right? D1 is 5 shillings, KE is 16%. But what we don't have is the growth rate. So that is what they want us to determine. But also remember, our MPS, we have been told is 131.98. 131.98. That is what they've asked us. So in this case, we need to do this. We need to use this formula because we have our D1. This is the formula that we shall use. We say PO is equal to D1 over KE minus G. But now G, we need to make this the subject of the formula. We need to make the G the subject of the formula. What do we do? We shall take the whole thing, we shall multiply both sides by KE minus G so that we get PO times KE minus G is equal to P1, right? Then we take all these other values on that other side. So which will be G or yes, we shall say G is equal to D1 divided by D1 divided by KE, not KE, divided by PO times, not times, but minus KE. Sinivo, someone tell me if the formula is correct. Someone tell me if this is correct. Okay, let's go the long method. The long method. So allow me to wrap this side. So this is what we are told. Our PO is equal to D1 over KE minus G, right? We want to make G the subject of the formula. What will we do? We shall multiply both sides by KE minus G. We multiply also this side by KE minus G, right? So this and this will cancel out. We shall remain with KE minus G times PO is equals to D1. We shall take this KE on the other part and so it will be, let's take G on the other side, so it will be on that to PO, we divide both sides by PO, we divide by PO, right? So PO will cancel out, so it will be KE minus G is equals to D1 over PO. Then we take G on the other end, not G. Yes, G on the other end, then this other one will remain on this other end. So it will be D1 over PO minus KE is equals to G. So our D1, we have 5. Over PO, we have 131.98. 131.98. Then we left what? Our KE of 0.16. What are we getting? Either it will be 0.16 minus, right? Because G is a local input, so it will be KE minus D1 over PO. Yes. Zero 0.1221. Good. And this is our new G. So we can say that our G is equal to 12.21%. That is the break-even growth rate. That is the break-even growth rate. Break-even growth rate. Unless there's someone with a question. Anyone with a question up to that point? Any question? how to punch the formula of G. So allow me to grab here. This is the formula we are told n minus 1 square root of current dividend divided by past dividend. Then less 1. So first of all, you work out this, right? So the answer that you get here will say n minus 1, or we can use our values instead of the formula itself. On this question, we had 5 minus 1 square root of 7.3 divided by 5, right? Yes, then less 1. So first of all, you need to determine the product here, which will be 5 minus 1, it will give us 4. So you take 4, then you press shift, then this sign. 4 shift, then this sign. After you press this sign, open the bracket and say 7.3 divided by 5, then you close the bracket, right? After you close the bracket, you press on equal sign. Press on equal sign, then take the answer minus 1. It will give you your formula there. The formula to get G as the subject. To get G as the subject, that is quantitative techniques. Quantitative techniques, making G the subject of the formula. Not merely concept here. Simultaneous equations. It's an equation. So you are making G the subject of the formula. Are we okay? Faith Atieno. Good. So for making G the subject of the formula, lazima ukwe mjanja. We are told that G, not G, but PO is equals to B, not BO. B1 over KE minus G. This is what you want as the subject. What do you do? First of all, you remove the denominator. The denominator from the equation by multiplying both sides by KE minus G. You multiply both sides by KE minus G, right? This and this will go away. They will cancel off. So we shall have KE minus G times PO is equal to D1, right? It's G, remember we want it to remain as the subject. So we divide both sides by PO. We divide both sides by PO, right? And this one will take away, will go away with each other, and therefore we shall remain with KE minus G is equals to D1 over PO, right? Once we've done this, we shall take this. The G is under your side, then these other values will come on this other end because of the negative sign. Remember, a product goes with the sign before it, right? So we say KE, this one is a positive sign because it doesn't have any value before. So it's KE minus D1 over PO is equals to G. And that is the thing that we've done here. KE minus D1 over PO is equals to G. Right? Then using this formula here, you can determine the break-even growth rates. So that is shine. I hope you are together now. Tuko sawa? Good. So that is how we calculate our intrinsic value in case of a constant growth firm, right? So the next class we shall be discussing about the supernormal growth firm. We shall be discussing about the supernormal growth firm. I don't want us to start it today because it will make us to confuse with this what we've learned today. So go digest what we have today. Then in our next class, which is tomorrow, same venue, same time, we shall be discussing on the supernormal growth firm as we look at many other factors under that topic, right? Anyone with a question up to that point? Up to that point, anyone with a question? Good. So if there's no question, let us stop it there for today. Let's meet tomorrow. Have a lovely evening.